My grandmother might be the most entitled person I've ever met. So we had to kick her out of our house. Yeah, it's a pretty messed up thing to do, considering she's in very bad health. But you guys would not believe some of the things my grams tried to pull. My grandmother is, shall we say, a stubborn person. Normally, this stubbornness would manifest itself as wanting to cook a meal a certain way, even if she isn't the one cooking, or simply not backing down about a disagreement until she hears you say she's right and you're wrong. Aggravating stuff, but for the most part we get along because I saw her in small doses. I'm also her only grandchild, so she was thrilled whenever I would come to visit, and that largely outweighed any clashing that we had. I got the sense it was also because she felt determined to have a good relationship with me after messing things up with Mother, her daughter. That's a long story there, and it's not my story to tell, but she went no contact with my gran in high school, and only reconnected with her after I was born, but things always remained tense between them. Anyways, things began when my grandmother's lease went up and she didn't want to renew it, so she moved out of her apartment and in with us. This was not an arrangement any of us were looking forward to, mainly because my parents have been trying to move out of our house since they bought it 2 decades ago. And also, we all knew prolonged exposure to my gran without a way to escape would cause problems. But she's family, and even if none of us were psyched about it, we're the only relatives that she has, so we did the right thing and took her in. She was also not very excited about it because it meant she would be giving up an entire living space that she'd be accustomed to. Living with her rapidly became difficult. She is, put plainly, a slob. She'd carry a box of tissues with her everywhere, and when she used the tissue, instead of throwing it away, she would just jam it wherever she was sitting. So our living room sofa quickly became a snotty mess. She would take food upstairs and never bring it back down. More than once, our kitchen was entirely empty of silverware, bowls, plates, you name it. We had to go upstairs and remove all the moldy, crusty dishes and take them downstairs to be washed before we could even use them. We asked her multiple times if she could help by just taking one dish down with her at a time. She would smile, nod, and then just not do it. Her bedroom looked like an episode of Hoarders, because she used an ungodly amount of tissues and would fill the entire trash bag with them, and that's not even counting the endless magazine subscriptions she had. She would also drink excessively. I used to run to the store and get her favorite bottle of wine at her request, and she quickly graduated to drinking an entire bottle in one sitting, sometimes 2 sittings. It got to the point that my parents and I had a mini intervention and told her point blank that we would not get her anymore. She starts getting it delivered to the house instead. One problem that affected me specifically was her radio. Her bedroom, it was next to mine, and all the walls had no insulation, so sound carried over easy, and she would blast her radio all through the night, preventing me from getting proper sleep. Multiple times, I would creep into her room at night and turn it down only for her to suddenly jerk awake and turn it back on. Whenever I confronted her about it, she would get angry and say I should accommodate her being hard at hearing, and that I need to compromise, as if waiting until 2 a.m. to turn it down wasn't a compromise enough. I bought her headphones, as well as a special pillow with a speaker inside of it, so that she could better hear the radio without needing to turn it up. She never even opened the box. The spoiled food problem eventually got so bad that we were a permanent smell, and when she found bugs in her room, she freaked out and blamed it on the home, which was a bold-faced lie because my dad had gutted and remodeled the entire house with his bare hands. It was bought originally as a fixer-upper, hence why they were planning on selling it. Also, literal pieces of rotting food tend to attract insects. Who knew? She eventually developed pneumonia and also blamed that on the house, even though by this point she wasn't leaving her room and she hasn't even bathed once in 6 months she's been living here. She even got my dad to screw metal handlebars into the bathroom wall so that she could use the tub, but never once even used it. She was prescribed medicine for the pneumonia, but would not take it, eventually requiring a nebulizer because of how severe it got. I think it actually might have transformed into something worse, but I can't remember the name. Well, 2 or 3 times she had to return to the hospital because her condition worsened, despite everything we did to keep her room clean and make sure she took all her medicine. When this happened, we would pull out all the furniture from her bedroom, scrub the carpets, remove any mold, bugs, and pick up trash and rotting food. Instead of being grateful or changing her habits, she'd be upset that we touched her stuff and say we violated her privacy. The damage that she was doing to the room also meant that selling the house was impossible. But her presence there meant the room would never have an opportunity to improve or be worked on. It was around the 2nd hospital trip that she started taking the little trash cans we've scattered around the house and using them as toilets. Yeah, that's right. For context, the upstairs bathroom is literally next door to her room. She just couldn't be bothered to go to it. I vividly remember picking up a plastic can and it being full of urine. She also had an incredibly old cat that she brought with her who was a sweetheart, but would defile the room with her waste because my gran could not clean the box herself. I'm definitely forgetting more things she did, but one thing I remember was my parents had gone away for the weekend and my boyfriend of the time came over. We ordered some Indian takeout, which I knew my gran loves, so we offered to get her something as well. She took us up on the offer and my boyfriend paid for it despite my protest. We gave her food only for her to call us back a few minutes later. She told my boyfriend that the rice in the takeout was the wrong kind and that she would not be eating it. Could he please take it away? I was flabbergasted by the rudeness of it all. My parents scolded her, but how inappropriate that act was, especially towards someone who isn't even a relative, but she turned them out. Not once did she ever say thank you. Not when we cleaned her room, or bought her groceries, or cleaned up her waste, nothing. My mom wanted nothing to do with her, and my dad wanted to help, but was too busy with work to really do anything. And even he reached his limit when her lifestyle began to damage the home. I was the most sympathetic to her, but she would summon me and ask me to do all sorts of things, then just send me away as if she was dismissing her servant. Even when I called her out on it, she didn't express any sort of gratitude. I fully believed that she was exhibiting a textbook case of, well, Diogenes syndrome, or senile something. Because of all the behavior matched, she was depressed about not having her own space anymore. We were sympathetic to that and tried to get her out of her room many times, but she fought us every single time and would even refuse to admit her behavior was unhealthy. When we would point out how ungrateful and rude her behavior was, she would get defensive and end the conversation. She needed psychological help. At the very least, she needed some sort of cleaning service or in-home nurse aid, but she refused the idea of one every time it was brought up. Her behavior caused so much stress that the entire family was on edge at each other's throats. It eventually reached a point where we admitted to ourselves that we were unfit to care for her because she needed professional help. So, we brought it up to her as she shut down the conversation so fast. I understand not wanting to go to a nursing home. I don't begrudge her for that. But she would insist that she was independent when the fact was that if we ignored her request, she'd simply be unable to fend for herself. She told us her solution was to keep things as they were. As long as we did things for her, she could take care of herself. Yeah, because that's definitely what the definition of independent is. It was like talking to a brick wall. So, One day, while everyone was out of the house, we received a call that she's tried to go down our stairs, fell, and broke her back. The fall was not lethal, nor would it cause any lasting permanent damage, which you could say was a relief. But it meant that she would require lots of physical therapy and caregivers. The hospital assigned her a social worker, I think because of the care she would need, but she refused them by citing that her family would take care of her needs, aka us. My father and I work full-time, and my mother has a slew of health problems and chronic pain that make it difficult for her to even look after herself sometimes. The idea that all three of us, even if we weren't fed up with her, would be able to drop everything and take care of was as hilarious as it was insulting. When she told us that was her plan, we had become so embittered toward her that our decision was easier than it should have been. We removed all her belongings from the house and put them into storage units that contained the rest of her items that she'd move out of her old place with. We called the social worker and told her in no uncertain terms that she would not be allowed to move back in with us and would need to find another place to live. She was furious. She sent a slew of emails threatening to sue for wrongful eviction. She didn't even pay rent and sign no contract. And suing for theft of property because, quote, we touched her stuff. But we technically returned it to her because it didn't belong with us, and my dad paid for that storage unit anyways. Those emails stopped pretty quickly when it became clear she would not have a case and wouldn't be able to intimidate us into letting her move back in. When she was discharged, finally, she did go to an assisted living facility that the hospital partners with, and she stayed there until she recovered. Despite everything, being in the hospital environment and the care facility improved the rest of her health a lot. But instead of staying as soon as she was able to discharge herself, she did. She moved into a hotel and has been there ever since. I do visit a few times to deliver some stuff, and that's been left behind. Each time I visit the hotel room, it's just in a worse state. We're pretty sure she's been refusing room service because she's embarrassed by it, but without anyone cleaning it's become caked in mold, dirty cat litter, and unwashed clothing. It's been over a year now, and I shudder to think what that place looks like now. It's terrible, but at this point we're basically just waiting for the call that tells us that she's passed away. I know, with her age and mind, are partial causes of this, but there's only so much behavior and borderline abuse you can excuse away from that. Family accounts from relatives that go back decades before I was born also confirm that this is just how she is, and has always been. I've moved in with my partner, and my parents moved into their dream home. None of us have any contact with her, and she has no one to blame but herself. I'm not sorry that she's essentially getting her comeuppance, but I'm not happy about it either. Let's just go ahead and read a couple comments. The first comment had OP reply to it. It says this: there are a lot of things about this that I find concerning. One that comes to mind is just how much financial harm may be accruing from what she's done to the hotel room. I'm a bit puzzled that they haven't insisted on inspecting it from time to time. Long-term lease or no, the place has to be generating an odor that would be noticeable, no? That's when OP replies saying this: it's definitely possible something's been said or even done by staff. I'd have no way of knowing without going over there myself. I only know that she's not been kicked out or anything like that, because my mother still keeps in contact with her aunt, my grandma's sister, who lives on the other side of the country. Gran and aunt still talk. I suppose it's also technically possible, however, it's pretty unlikely, that she realized it's up to her and is doing what she can to mitigate the mess. Guys, I want to know your thoughts about this story, but first let me read this other comment. It's really short. It says, paramedic here. You have no idea how bad some of those long-term hotels will allow a room to get. So yeah, knowing that little bit of info, I can only imagine what that room looks like. Guys, if you've ever been in a situation like this, let me know your thoughts, your scenarios, your situations. Drop it in the comment section down below. We have one more story to look at. The title is this: Am I the a-hole for going on a vacation with my wife's family instead of my own? A bit of background. My family's always been well off, and by that I mean like we would take family vacations 2 to 3 times a year. It's still like that now, but I've noticed a difference in how my family acts now that I, 27 female, married my 24-year-old wife. About 3 weeks ago, my dad booked a trip to Italy. Everyone was excited, and my family group chat was lighting up for days following the announcement. I called my father and talked to him for a while, and eventually I thanked him for including my wife, who'd always felt left out. Well, there was a slight pause, and he told me that he booked the rest of the available seats on that particular flight, and there was only enough for him, my mother, grandparents, my sister, her husband, and me. He booked it without even taking my wife into consideration. Now, I know what a lot of people would think, that it was just a mistake, but I don't think so, given the fact that my wife has been excluded in other ways before, and if it were a mistake, he would do everything he could to change it before even announcing the vacation. My heart sunk. I looked at my wife, who could tell something was off, and I told my dad to just give my seat to somebody else because if she's not included, I'm not included. In the past, I was able to include my wife myself, but I was tired of us being singled out. They never did that to my sister and her husband. They've always included them as a couple. But when it comes to my wife and I, we've always had to find our own way into this little mix, as if we weren't to be taken seriously. I'm not doing that now, and I drew the hard line in the sand this time. This man had the audacity to say that her and I could book our own flight and just, meet them there. I said absolutely not, then hung up the phone. Needless to say, my wife was in tears. She was upset, but she was glad that I was sticking by her. A couple days went by, and we decided to go on our own little vacation to a much humbler location. A large rental cabin with her family, who were all downright amazing. Well, my family found out, and they've not stopped blowing up my phone. My mom called me one night during all this and said that I was being unreasonable, and that there's no way I couldn't just book a separate flight and instead of booking an entirely different vacation with her family. I explained to her that wasn't the point. The point was that they've excluded my wife from every single family-oriented related event ever since we got married, which always put me in the position to fix it. My mom basically called me crazy and that I was overthinking a simple mistake on my father's part. For some reason, I'm starting to think that maybe I am overthinking it and that I should just talk with my dad to see if excluding my wife was intentional, which was another point my mom brought up. So guys, I do want to know from y'all, am I the a-hole? What's up everybody, Mr. Reddito here. I just want to let you guys know there was an update for this story that came out 8 days later. So let's jump into that update, which will wrap up the story. I hope you guys are enjoying your day so far. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and click that subscribe button for daily videos of some of the craziest stories. And here's your update 8 days later. First off, thank you. Thank you to all for the positivity. It's been amazing seeing so much support. We did not post an update yesterday since it was Valentine's Day, as we were posting it today. We had a family meeting at our house on Monday, and it was interesting. I started with reminding my father what he did, how it matched up to all the other times, and how it made her and I feel. And how this and Mom's reaction made us feel as well. I told him that my wife is my everything, and what we do together. Our marriage is just as valid. You're either wanting us in your life or you don't, and lately your actions have told us the latter. Then I brought up the gaslighting. We did some digging the previous night, watched videos, and read articles to better understand it. I explained to them what it was, how they did it, and how it made us feel. My conclusion was my reasoning for planning the separate vacation with my wife's family in the first place. At this point, my sister starts to cry. She apologized for not saying anything and not paying attention. Her husband, well, he was upset as well. My sister said, "You have to book a different flight, Dad." To which I pointed out that it's okay, it's too late. Our vacation was already booked and we would not bail out now. My sister then said, "Well, then we're not going to Italy either." "You two," meaning Mom and Dad, "can go, but we're not," said my sister. Well, she said she feels horrible now. Cue the argument between my parents and my sister at this point. My wife and I sat there with our mouths hung open until my sister and her husband got up and left. My suspicions were right. The reason why my wife and I were being treated unfairly was because of the inheritance fears. Well, their explanation was that they didn't want inheritance, quote, getting into the wrong hands. So they wanted to dote on my sister and her husband to ensure that it won't. Yeah, their actual words. That reason there confirmed everything because they basically said, yes, we treat your sister plus her husband better and we're driving it home with the inheritance. It ended with my parents leaving angry. Not their actions, but the fact that they were getting called out. And from this point on, we'll be going low contact with my parents and maybe try to amend things between my sister and her husband. We will not be attending gatherings, events, or any of that if one or both of us feel excluded. We will demand that we be treated just as seriously. We now know our boundaries and we're going to set them. It was a very heartbreaking experience and we're disgusted at the whole thing. We still are though. Right now, we just have to take this time to move on. I doubt we'll be able to make any more updates beyond this, but again, we wanted to thank everybody for the advice, the love, and support in all the comment sections. We truly appreciate it. By the way, this was a throwaway, but I think I'm going to keep this account. Keep it up, just not to save the login info. Thank you everybody once again, and best wishes. So this commenter was confused at first. He said, I read the whole thing through before going back and rechecking the genders, and now it all makes sense. First of all, the inheritance thing is dumb. Like, it's your money, you can write your will however. Focusing your attention isn't going to, make the money like the other kid more. Just change the will. I mean, obviously, it's just a lame excuse for not liking a girl and girl getting married. But it's a particularly dumb and illogical argument. So guys, let me know, do you think that's what the problem here is? It's pretty obvious that this family is just mad because they're lesbian. Guys, let me know your thoughts about this story. Drop it down below. I want to know what your thoughts are. If you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure you do subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming stories. Thank you for joining in on this. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you have a fantastic day. And remember, it is cool to be kind. I'll catch you guys in the next one.